everybody, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Amber Rose, also known as a religious hippie. You can basically follow me on any social media platform, or you can go straight to my website at thereligioushippie.com. I wanted to say thank you for everyone who has and is supporting this ministry financially. I truly do appreciate your donations. I couldn't do this work without you, so thank you. And if you do feel called to donate and to help me continue this ministry, you can do so down below. Any amount really does help me keep this ministry running, so thank you so much. Okay. So far, I have already done one video on pornography, and YouTube didn't like it very much, so I will unfortunately have to be muting out certain words because of that. Otherwise, you know, you get too many strikes and then they ban your account. So, however, that is not going to stop me from talking about this very important topic and helping those who struggle with this addiction. So, without further ado, let's get started. Now, some people have come to me and they've asked me, Amber, why is pornography considered a sin? Well, pornography offends the dignity of the human person and the sanctity of marriage. It distorts God's plan for human sexuality by removing the conjugal act from its sacred context of love and procreation, turning it into an object for selfish gratification. The Catechism of the Catholic Church 2354 defines pornography as removing real or stimulated acts from the intimacy of the partners in order to display them deliberately to third parties. So yeah, this is horrible. It's a perverted act. It's degrading to everybody who's participating in it, and it immerses the person who's addicted to pornography into feeling alienated from God and from other people. Pope Benedict XVI in Deus Caritas Est states that true love involves self-giving and sacrifice, which pornography rejects entirely. Instead, it fosters a selfish, inward-looking mentality that is completely opposed to the nature of love. Not to mention the impact that has on somebody's soul. This is a grave matter. This is grave sin. Now, in order for a mortal sin to take place, there needs to be three things: grave matter, full knowledge on the participant's part, knowing that it is bad and doing it anyways, and freely doing it even though they know it's bad. So freely doing it, using your free will to commit this grave sin, knowing that it's a grave sin and doing it anyways, and then the grave matter, of course, which is the sin. All three things equal a mortal sin. If one of those three things is missing, it's a venial sin. And what mortal sin does is it severs your relationship with God. Without going to confession and without repentance, this can lead to eternal separation from God. So why is so harmful? I feel like it's kind of obvious as to why it's so harmful, but I think Pope Francis said it really well. He said that pornography is a vice that weakens the soul, and he explicitly warned that the devil enters through it. So this underscores the spiritual dangers of pornography, not just in leading to other sins like but in opening a gateway for demonic influence. And exorcists like Father Vincent Lampert have talked about a direct connection between pornography addiction and increased demonic activity. And this demonic activity can manifest as obsession, oppression, and even possession in extreme circumstances. Pornography really does welcome in the darkness and kind of extinguish the light of Christ in your life. Father Gabriel Amoreth, you guys are very familiar with him. He's probably one of the most famous exorcists that have ever existed. He stated that pornography is a common tool the devil uses to ensnare souls, and those who are entangled in this pornography spiral, they need spiritual as well as psychological healing to fully escape its influence. Now, this doesn't even begin to scratch the surface of how damaging that pornography addiction can be, especially to relationships. Christopher West said that pornography incapacitates men from loving women properly. Pornography trains individuals to view other people as objects for self-gratification or personal pleasure, rather than people to be loved and respected. And of course, this then leads to marital strains. Spouses often feel betrayed, unloved, and inadequate. There's an erosion of intimacy because fosters isolation, it prevents authentic self-giving relationships, and even friendships at times. I had somebody comment once that when they were addicted to pornography, they couldn't even make proper friends because of how it corroded their brain and how it just forced him to view people differently. And so that's a really interesting link between pornography, isolation, and everything going on these days. Now, there's also societal effects when it comes to pornography, and I'm sure we're all very much so aware of this, especially when Sound of Freedom came out. Granted, that kind of targets more like the child industry when it comes to these things, not so much the adult, but it does show you the horrors that go on, what is happening still till this day. Something to realize is that the pornography industry is driven by profit. So it thrives on exploitation. The US bishops actually have a document that is titled Create in Me a Clean Heart. I've linked it below for you guys for your leisure to read. I think it's really, really important to read. And in that document, they describe it as an industry of sin that preys on human weaknesses to generate billions of dollars. I mean, this industry, it fuels human trafficking and perpetuates the exploitation of women and children. Absolutely sickening. And now there was news that just came out that OnlyFans is also a culprit in sex trafficking now. Now, pornography has huge effects on our brains. We already see how it can affect relationships, how it can affect the industry, how it thrives off of exploitation, women and children, etc. But it has huge impacts on our brains. Yes, it can change the way that we view people, but it's more than that. Neuroscience studies have shown that pornography rewires the brain, completely just rewired. It creates addictive behaviors akin to drug abuse, and the viewers end up developing tolerance, which requires an increase in explicit material to achieve the same satisfaction, which deepens their enslavement, and then the content they consume becomes more darker and more violent, and sometimes even ends up going into the same sex type of pornography. While I talked about how to quit pornography in my last video, I want to reiterate some things and add in some new tips here. First thing you need to do if you want to quit pornography is to recognize that it's a sin. You need to acknowledge that it is a grave sin. You have to acknowledge that you have a problem and that you need to get help. I mean, pornography, it's destructive not only to us, but to our relationship and to basically anyone we come in contact with. We need to admit that we need God's grace and forgiveness, and you can't get help unless you admit that there's a problem. The second thing you need to do is you need to frequent the sacraments. Make sure you're going to confession and you are confessing the sin. This sacrament is essential for healing. Through it, we receive God's forgiveness and the grace to resist future temptations. As the US bishop stated, this sin needs the Lord's forgiveness and should be confessed. The other sacrament you should be receiving regularly is the Eucharist, only in a state of grace. If you are not in a state of grace, do not receive it. Do an act of spiritual communion instead. But the Eucharist is so important because it gives us strengths in our soul, and it provides spiritual nourishment for the battle against temptation. So be sure to receive it after going to confession, and remember, never receive it in a state of mortal sin. Go to daily mass if you can. Another thing you should really consider doing is developing a prayer life. I would highly suggest you consider these prayers: the St. Michael prayer for spiritual protection, the Rosary to meditate on the life of Christ and draw closer to Mary, who is the model of purity. Do an act of consecration, offer your struggles to the Sacred Heart of Jesus, and ask Him to purify your desires. Ask Him to give you the grace of forgetfulness so that you can forget the images and move on from this addiction. Make sure that you're praying the act of contrition when you do slip up, so that you make amends right then and there, and you're going to schedule a confession as soon as possible. And of course, as always, make sure that you invoke our Heavenly Mother if you're feeling temptations. She is there to help us, and she wants to help you. Now, some practical things you can do, which I've also kind of talked about in my last video, is installing web blockers. Covenant Eyes is phenomenal. I know tons of people were talking about it in the comment section because I didn't exactly mention it by name, but Covenant Eyes is phenomenal. Another thing you need to do is figure out what your triggers are. Is it being around a certain type of person, a certain friend? Is it a certain TV show, certain music? Is it your phone being in your room late at night? What are your triggers? And then you have to avoid those triggers. Charge your phone outside of your room. Charge your phone downstairs. Unsubscribe from Netflix or whatever streaming service you are watching your show on. All of these things are very, very important. And people are like, oh, well, I don't want to give up my TV show. So you'd rather give up heaven? Our Lady of Fatima told us that more people go to hell for sins of the flesh than anything else. I'm not trying to scare anybody, but that should be a wake-up call. Another thing I think people should do, especially men, obviously women should do this as well, but I've heard a lot of men get more out of this than I have from the ladies, and that is to do Strive 21 or Exodus 90, basically getting a support type of group. And it has to be trusted guys, like guys you know who aren't going to beat down on you, but instead lift you up, help you be a saint, help you be better, push you to be better, and are willing to walk with you in this journey. The U.S. bishops actually have resources on pornography addiction, so I'm going to link those below for you as well. Now, I think it's in general really important to have community to help you, or at least an accountability partner. I've found that women thrive more on the accountability partner than they do in the group setting. So an accountability partner should be somebody who's the same sex as you, somebody that is trusted, preferably not a family member, and somebody that will check in on you and you can be honest with and be like, hey, I've really been struggling with this, and they will push you to be better. I've heard that this has worked for so many people. This has worked for me because when somebody's holding you accountable, you don't want to let that person down. Another thing that I didn't actually mention in my last video, but I just remembered now, something that really helped me was face-to-face confessions. I went to the same priest every single time. I did not priest shop. I didn't care how humiliating it was that I had to be face-to-face with a priest and he had to hear the exact same sin. I knew that that was good for me because then I was less likely to commit that sin again, because I'd have to look the priest in the eyes and he's in persona Christi. So I am looking Christ in the eyes and telling him about my sins, the sins that nailed him to the cross. And that really gives me motivation to not do it. And I'm hoping that that might give you guys motivation too.
Oh, but it's too scary. Oh, but I don't want to because it...
You guys need to. This is how virtue is built, by doing difficult things, by doing hard things. And we need to take these addictions seriously. Healing isn't going to be easy, but you need to do it. You need to build strength, fortitude, temperance. You need to build virtue. You need to build strength to overcome this and combat it. And you also need to exercise your free will. I think a lot of us forget that we have free will in these circumstances. We do not have to be forced into one or the other. The devil doesn't make us do something. And I do believe that too many people give in to their desires. They're not used to saying no to themselves. They're not used to rejecting the things that they want, even if they're not inherently evil or bad. Let's say that you usually on Wednesdays get a donut. Don't let yourself have that donut on Wednesdays. Deny yourself. Fast. Make sure that you are not letting your flesh control you. It's not good to let our bodies have everything that they desire. So being able to tell ourselves no is very, very important. So tell yourself no often. And it doesn't even have to, again, it doesn't have to be bad. You know, it could be, oh, I want another coffee today. No, I'm not going to have any more coffees today, and I'm going to do this in reparation for my sins. It's going to be hard at first, but it will get easier the more you do it. Now, let's say you do slip up. What do? It's not the end. Please do not go into despair. Please do not panic or give up. You need to do an act of contrition. Pick yourself up again, brush yourself off, make a commitment to go to confession as soon as possible, receive absolution, make amends, to never fall into that sin again. You're going to try everything you possibly can to not fall into that sin again. And remember that freedom from pornography is a daily choice, sometimes an hourly choice. You have free will. Use it. Now, combating temptation can be tricky. It's a lot harder when you're in the moment than when you're like, yeah, I can totally defeat temptation. Like, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But then it actually happens and you're just like whimpering and crying in a corner because it's too much. First thing I want to say is to avoid any self-inflicted temptations. Again, that means removing any TV shows that make you sin, surrounding yourself with people who make you sin, listening to music that makes you sin, all of that stuff. You need to remove that from your life. This could also look like unfollowing certain celebrities or unfollowing certain people who lead you to sin or lust after them. Fasting is also something you can do that is very, very helpful against temptation. And if you feel as though you are being sucked into temptation, try to remove yourself from that situation. If you feel like you are being bombarded with temptations, get up, go for a walk, do some push-ups, do something, remove yourself from that situation. And most temptations will subside within 5 minutes. Also, don't forget to pray your rosary daily. You can't sin and pray the rosary daily. You have to give one of them up, and you should be giving up sin. And so if you are praying the rosary daily and you are asking for deliverance and you're asking to be forgiven, these are really, really important. It shows humility. It shows that you're leaning on God. And even though the road can be very difficult to healing, it's so important that you do heal. So kind of just to summarize everything, pornography is a grave sin. It distorts love and it dehumanizes participants and invites spiritual darkness into your life. The church, in her wisdom and mercy, offers a path of freedom through prayers and sacraments and a supportive community. You can break free from its grip and embrace the love of Christ. So just take courage and remember that through Christ, nothing is impossible. You are not a lost cause. You are not worthless. You are not an evil person. You are a beloved child of God, and God is calling you to freedom, to healing, and to holiness. And with all of that being said, guys, that is all I have for today's video. I hope this was helpful. I will be talking more about this as time goes on. Let me know specifically if there's anything you'd like me to touch on regarding this topic, and I will do my best to get those out for you guys. So with all of that being said, I hope this helped. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need it. Talk to you guys in the next video. Bye.